Guys, I'm super excited to bring this podcast episode to you guys today because I've got three people in the show, a couple of them from big tech, Amazon, Google, and stuff like that. And yeah, really interesting conversation where we're going to share our perspectives on coding as a career and what most people get wrong about it when they start to learn and the assumptions they've made that are incorrect. That's one thing we're going to talk about. The second thing we're going to talk about is the various stages that you need to pass through when A, becoming a coder, and B, when you are a coder and you want to level up your career into the next tech job, promotions, big tech, and so on. And the last topic that we end up covering is really quite fascinating. It's why non-coders think that AI is a threat to coding, whereas coders don't actually think so, and a real analysis of what AI is actually going to do for any job, not just coding. So you're going to love this episode, and I'm going to give you a few snippets now of what to expect, and then we get into the main episode. Enjoy.
I think the main thing that people really underestimate when they're trying to weigh whether or not they should break into code is the amount of friction they're going to encounter.
But let me tell you, the longer you avoid social interaction, the less chances your salary will increase faster. So if you want to be like a lone coder for as long as you want, that's cool, but you're going to cap out your salary pretty quickly.
They don't realize the stress of being a software developer, that people just don't realize. Like, it's chill in some ways, but it's really stressful in other ways.
Literally, your entire notion of the job is built on highlight reels, and people don't pause to think, okay, I'm seeing a two-dimensional 90-second representation of what people are spending 8 to 10 hours a day on. What's being left out? Welcome to Easier Said Than Done with me, Zubin Pratap, where I share with you the tens of thousands of dollars worth of self-development that I did on my journey from 37-year-old lawyer to professional software engineer. The goal of this podcast is to show you how to actually do those things that are easier said than done. Hey everybody, welcome to the Easier Said Than Done podcast. And today I'm super excited to have a couple of my friends here with you. Well, not couple, three, technically. I heard my mom's voice just then saying, three is not couple. Anyhow, so we've got three of my friends here. We've got Anna, we've got Nate, and we've got Brian. And I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. But we thought we'd all come together today to have a conversation with those of you listening in and watching about the nature of getting into code as a profession, and then what leveling up looks like in that profession, and how the journey is a long continuum, and there are many paths to Rome, as they say. And you know, we can walk you through all our philosophies. All of us have sort of done it in different ways and touched the industry in different ways, and we have an experience spanning from big tech to very non-traditional backgrounds here, and so we'll walk you through all that. So with that said, let me try and go around the table and have everyone introduce themselves. Anna, let's start with you.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm a co-founder together with Nate, who you'll hear from, of Code Career Mastery. My background is actually in product management, and I worked in tech for 10 years before I went out and started my own business, helping career changers and software engineers navigate their path in tech. I'll pass it over to Nate.
Hello, everybody. As Anna mentioned, I am the other co-founder of Code Career Mastery, and I've been working in tech for over 10 years now. I do have a non-traditional background. I started just in freelancing, doing some consulting work, and then made my way into small companies, and then eventually all the way up into big tech. So currently I'm working at Amazon as a software engineer, and I'm super passionate about, helping people really focus in on what their next biggest mover is, whether that's breaking into their code career or trying to get to the next level.
Awesome. And Brian's no stranger to the show. Brian and I have spoken in the show before, so it's great to have Brian back.
Yeah, it's great to see my long lost brother on the show again. So I'm Brian, software engineer with about 10 years of experience, most recently an engineering manager, and also the owner of Parsity, a coding boot camp for career changers.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, it's wonderful to have everybody here. And just for those who've never heard from me or of me in any way before, I'm Zubin. I am from a non-traditional background, like a few other people here as well. I was a lawyer for a very, very long time. And in my late 30s, taught myself to code and ended up being at Google for a while. And I work globally, remotely as an engineer. So very, very bizarre background. And I also coach very busy people who typically can't go to something like what Brian's offering. I teach them how to get into code as an alternative. They can't do the bootcamp thing, and that's not viable for them. And so that's what I do as well. And my program's called the Future Coders Inner Circle program. So guys, let's talk about a couple of things. First and foremost, what I thought I'd love to hear from you guys about is our perspectives on coding as a career. And what I really want to start with is how so many people get their expectations wrong about this, right? I'm just going to leave it there at a high level of what most people get wrong when they think about coding as a career and they're coming in outside, or they think about big tech or whatever, those assumptions, those hidden assumptions that most people haven't examined and build their entire plan on and often find they're wrong. So, again, why don't we just go in the same order? Anna, why don't you, sort of share your views of what people often get wrong?
Sure. So, although I'm not a developer, I've worked with tons of developers and I've coached a lot of developers. And what I find is that a lot of people assume that going into development, you can avoid a lot of social interaction. And in fact, in the first couple of years of your career, you can. But let me tell you, the longer you avoid social interaction, the less chances your salary will increase faster. So if you want to be like a lone coder for as long as you want, that's cool, but you're going to cap out your salary pretty quickly. And the second thing a lot of people assume or kind of get wrong is that when you get into tech, there's going to be pathways and a lot of support. And some companies do have some version of this, but tech is a very entrepreneurial space where taking as much initiative as possible is rewarded, again, in the right company. So it's really important to know that you are responsible for creating your pathways. And if you're not at a company that doesn't provide good mentorship, or you don't have supportive managers, or you don't like your team, you have to do something about it. No one's going to go handing out things to you. So it's important to own your pathway. And there's a lot of opportunities to do that.
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts on that. But Nate, how about you?
Yeah, I think the main thing that people really underestimate when they're trying to weigh whether or not they should break into code is the amount of friction they're going to encounter. I think that's a really big one. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that in relationship to the whole AI discussion that I think we're going to touch on today. But just like with any career change or entering into any career, there's always going to be a little friction for sure. But when you're coming in from another career, or you're sort of coming from a non-technical background, there's just a lot. There's a lot that can cause you to stop. And myself included, there have been times, like as I was trying to get into coding, where I just stopped. I think for like a year once, I was doing a bunch of coding stuff, and then I stopped, and I kind of had this panic that I was going to lose all of my skills. And thankfully I found my way back to it. But just because of the nature of the beast, because of all of the technical things you have to learn, and all of the concepts that you have to not only wrap your head around, but then start to apply and start to master, there's just a lot. There's a lot to keep you, or I should say it this way, the number of things that can cause you to give up or kind of like change your path is very high. So you have to really, really be determined, and you have to be really, really clear on your why and sort of your motivation for wanting to change careers in the first place. I think that's really important.
That's huge. That resonates a lot with me. And how about you, Brian? What are your thoughts on what people often get wrong when they want to learn? Because you see this a lot in Varsity, in the boot camp, and when people approach you. So
for sure. I mean, I think TikTok has made us all think big bags, chill schedule, lattes, foosball, those day in the life things. And I think that's ultimately what people are chasing a lot of times. They don't realize, like, I'm sure Nate or Anna or any of us can talk about things like on call, the stress of being a software developer that people just don't realize. Like, it's chill in some ways, but it's really stressful in other ways.
Yeah, and so just on that, is especially like I think the problem is when people's entire world is defined by what they saw in 90-second videos. Like literally your entire notion of the job is built on highlight reels, and people don't pause to think, okay, I'm seeing a two-dimensional 90-second representation of what people are spending 8 to 10 hours a day on. What's being left out? And you start asking that question, you're like, okay, pretty much 99.99999% of the details being left out, because it's 90 seconds versus an 8-hour day. So the ratio I see in social media is 1 commit to 3 hours of yoga and 4 quarts of kombucha. Right. And that's just not the ratio in the real world. It's just not how it
ratio.
The commit to quart ratio is off, right? It's just not right. So that's a huge thing. And Anna, you said something really, really interesting, which is the importance of the social angle, right? So question for you, just on that, How do you factor remote work into that? And a little bit of context. The reason I'm asking that is I literally just a few hours ago posted on LinkedIn about how I think remote work is not work from home flexible. I don't consider that to be remote work. I just consider that to be flexible working when you work from home a few days a week. Remote work being you're always at home, there is no office, you're not meeting your colleagues, and generally they're in a different city or time zone. Or like me, I work my teams across 7 time zones on the planet. So, it's a whole different ballgame. In remote work, a lot of people seem to think that this is great. I can live and work from anywhere. And I agree with you that not building the social capital, I'll be talking about this in another episode of the podcast about, remote working skills, but not having the social capital can really come back to bite you down the track. And you also miss out on that vital period of apprenticeship when you think you know stuff and you don't for the first 2 years, and you really need people to help you in person. So what are your thoughts on that, Anna? How do you balance the social side with the trend towards remote work?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is super, super important, especially people that kind of come to tech later in their career. And on top of that, if you come to tech later in your career and it's from a career that isn't computer or knowledge based, like if you were a doctor and you interacted with people, or you're in retail or service based industry, or in the restaurant, anything that's not computer first or like a knowledge work, it's going to be really hard to transition. You will be able to, but you basically have to take all those skills of interacting in person and transition them to the digital space. And this is doubly hard because we don't have tactile feedback. And as humans, we're scared of rejection. Yeah. So when I say something like, in the first 3 months of your job, DM everyone on your team and set up one-on-one meetings with them so that you can create your own relationships with them outside of your work projects or your Scrum meetings. You may say, oh, what if they don't want to meet with me? What if they're busy? So if your response is, I'm scared of rejection, you're going to limit your ability to build relationships, which means you're limiting your ability to opportunities and projects and better pay and growth. So you have to transition your social skills or learn them into the digital space by taking complete responsibility over initiating conversation.
Spot on. I love it. I'm actually building a short course on this at the moment because I've been remote working in one way or the other for since 2012, 2013. And that includes back when I was a lawyer and I was doing sort of international work. Most of the people I had to coordinate with and influence, and to your point, and sort of build those relationships enough to influence, were in multiple countries. So a lot of the work I did were people around the world as we coordinated a lot of legal work. And I had to lead those teams that have people I've never met. And that's a whole different skill because you have to think through, how are they going to respond? When are they going to respond? What are they in the middle of when they see this? Because it's not like you have a visual cue anymore. And the lack of a visual cue is something we just don't think about. Yeah. So, it's a huge one. And that's why I'm sort of building this course around that, because I think people underestimate, especially folks who haven't got too much workplace experience, underestimate what the osmotic benefit of being in the workplace used to be like and how that needs to be translated to a digital world, right? Awesome.
I always joke that there's no onboarding guide when you join LinkedIn. Similarly, there's no onboarding guide when you join Slack.
1000%. There isn't. In fact, it's funny you say that. I've been trying to sort of build something like that. And when I was at Google, I was onboarding during COVID, which was a really hard time to onboard, and it was remote. And that was hard. Like they just hadn't thought through it, and like the world's largest code base and stuff like it was really hard. I was very lucky to have a supportive team, but I observed plenty of people who didn't. And it's really hard to onboard people when they're 17 hours ahead of you. Let me tell you that, or 17 hours behind you, depending on how you look at it. Like it's a really hard thing. And sort of building those relations. There's no way, if that was my first or second job, there is no way I would have thrived. It was because I was in my late 30s and I'd been around and I'd led teams before, and I was, I wasn't a people leader, but it was because I had all that experience in the workplace that I was able to parlay that into a completely digital setting, saying, all right, what's the digital map? What's the equivalent of that I need to do, to get. Nate, did you have something to say? Because it looks like, you.
Yeah, I unmuted. So can you tell? No. So I had a very similar experience when I was onboarding with Amazon. It was during COVID. And I was supposed to relocate to New York, and that was in progress, but no one was in the office. So it was my first time being at a big company. And as you know, you'd expect like these big companies to have, all their shit together when it comes to tooling and when it comes to process and documentation. But it's just like really overwhelming. And Google may be a little bit better than Amazon, but still extremely overwhelming. And the only social interactions I had were these really kind of like awkward forced one-on-ones that were assigned to you. And then your stand-up, which everyone was kind of like sheepishly saying like what they did yesterday and what they were doing that day. And it was like really uncomfortable for a while. And that totally changed when I started going to the office. Like those social cues just kind of help ease
1000%.
everything.
And digital behavior,
totally wild experience.
And and I think it would have been especially hard for you, Nate. I'm sort of using my imagination a bit here, because if you don't have big corporate experience, there's all of that, the unwritten rules around all of that, and the practices that would have been alien to you that you would have had to navigate. Like, kudos to you for sort of, persisting and going through that, because I can't imagine how difficult that would have been, not having that sort of background as well to understand how these big corporates work. It's really, really, really hard. So look, really interesting discussion. One comment I had on what Brian said, which is about, the social media stuff, just going back to that for just a moment. Brian, why do you think people believe that that's what it is? Is it hope, or is it just that people aren't being critical in their examination or critical in their research? What do you think it is?
I'm sure there's some sort of human like condition that leads us to want to believe that things like this can be easily solved. You see a problem, and the reason why people go for a weight loss supplement rather than working out really hard. I think oftentimes we know what we're actually supposed to do, but we think there's a shortcut that somebody smarter has figured out. And if I just do this shortcut, I'll get all the benefits with none of the hard work. So I think it's enticing to believe that on the other end of this thing, there's something that's going to magically make you unlock the potential of your life.
That's a bit scary. Actually, it's a very perceptive comment, because I was just reading or listening to a podcast where I can't remember who it was, where they said that the supplement industry is 4 times bigger than the gym industry. And the reason is because people think it's the shortcut, it's the easy way. And I'm like, that's just mind-blowing, right? So that's really fantastic. And Nate, we're going to talk about—
I want to mention, I feel like a lot of people will try multiple shortcuts until they don't see the outcomes, and only then will they reach the threshold of pain that they'll try the hard things. And we've all done that, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Good point,
100%.
for sure.
We've all done it. Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the human. That's also what drives innovation. Like, I doubt we would have invented the wheel if we didn't want an easier way to get around. Like, it's that impulse to laziness that drives us to do things like that. And I see this a lot, because I've actually worked with folks that have been, who've tried all sorts of things. People who've done computer science degrees, people who've done boot camps, people who started from zero, and very few of them actually, Anna, end up thinking, hang on, this is not working because I tried the wrong thing. Surprisingly large and a distressing number. This is what depresses me. A distressing number think I'm not good enough. It's like they did the wrong thing, didn't know they were doing the wrong thing, had all the wrong expectations, and then blame themselves for the lack of success. And that's really unfortunate, because I think we lose that, especially as people get older. It does things to your confidence when you try and don't succeed. But if you tried the wrong thing and you don't succeed, it shouldn't affect your confidence, because it had nothing to do with you. It had to do with the fact that you were, using a hammer to try and, I don't know, steer a boat, whatever. Like, it's a ridiculous metaphor, but you're using the wrong tool for the job. So yes, it's that's why I try and sort of, and I think all of us do this, which is why I brought us all here together, is to sort of lift the curtain a little bit on what the reality is like, because the right expectations will help people make a better plan. Because we're all defeated by wrong expectations more than the wrong effort. And I think that's something we need to help people avoid. So just going back to Nate's point about friction. So do you remember, Nate, for yourself, the stages that you needed to pass through before you started to feel, okay, I think I can actually get this?
I don't know if I have like a super clean, like this was stage A, this was stage B, but I have sort of like an interesting like perspective and framing on this. First of all, I think like becoming a good coder, becoming a good developer and problem solver is just getting really good at failure. Like, that's kind of what it is. Like, that's what it boils down to. So whenever you do something wrong, or you feel like you're not making progress, you're hitting that friction, what I've always encouraged people with is like, you're doing the hard work. You're doing the thing that's actually making you better. if that's actually, you solving your own problems and, learning how to build something, right? So for me, I had some cool opportunities to like cut my teeth on paid projects before I was ready.
Nice.
And at every stage that I was kind of like leveling up my technical abilities, it was always because I was able to like find a project that was like just outside the scope of what I had done before. And
Perfect.
that's like where it all started for me. I remember my first technical project was literally just building a WordPress site. It was like a custom WordPress theme. And I love telling the story. I signed on to that project. It was for a friend, and they were going to pay me like $100. I wasn't even planning on doing coding as a career yet. Like that wasn't even on the table. But I remember like poring over the template hierarchy and WordPress loop documentation pages. I don't know if you guys have worked with WordPress before, but I didn't have any like PHP experience. I remember like literally like getting so frustrated. I think I was like 18 or 19 at the time. It like brought me to tears. I'm not even kidding. This actually happened. But I had already said that I was going to do this. So that commitment was a factor in sort of pulling me through that friction. And I got it eventually, I just had to sit with it. I had to like give my brain some time to sort of like try to absorb the concepts and then sit with it a little longer and kind of keep coming back to where I was getting stuck. And eventually I was able to get through that wall. And that was a big point of growth. And then a couple projects later, I was like, oh, like I can actually charge real money for this. And then I was able to find people in my sort of like within one connection of my general network who needed more work like that. But that was I think the main thing that started it for me to like really take it serious was these actual work opportunities, that I had early on.
I 1000% relate to that. So I think similar to you, I first tried to learn to code 2013. So 2013, 2014, 20, I missed 2015 and 16 because of the MBA, and then 2017 and 2018. Those are the 4 times. 2018, the only reason I succeeded, I believe, is because the reason I restarted trying to learn to code was I was in the middle of my startup. I'd lost 6 figures on it, or invested 6 figures in it. And my fractional CTO quit because he had a baby or was about to have a baby. And he said, I can't take on this kind of risk anymore. And so I had all these contracts with local governments and stuff that I needed to deliver on. And I was like, this is a question of honor, of being able to honor my own contracts for my startup, which I know is going down the toilet, but I have to try and do it. And that's what gave me the sticking power enough to overcome all those failures you talk about, Nate, because I'm a grown ass. There's a picture that my ex-wife has of me with my face in my hands crying at 1:30 in the morning because I thought I'd thrown my entire life down the toilet. I left a successful career in the law, left a successful career in management, and there I was trying to I don't know whether centering a div or actually doing something more meaningful. I don't know what was that I was doing, but I was defeated at 1:30 in the morning. She very kindly excluded the part where my butt was hanging out of the track pants because I honestly looked like a completely desolate, homeless guy just with my head in my hands and that. Like it was absolute devastation, right? And the only reason I stuck through it is because I was afraid of losing face with the contracts that I'd signed and not being able to deliver on my reputation. I genuinely believe that had I not found my mentor shortly after that, who was more like she was non-technical mindset, I would not have persisted. Like I genuinely believe without the help, I would not have persisted. And then the rest of, my history, same thing with you, right? Like you need something that's going to make you suffer through that pain and that discomfort before you'll break through to the other side. And Brian, I know you're no stranger to this, man. So what are your views on, especially when you see people coming to boot camps? I know we've spoken about this in the previous episode, but what are your views about what it takes for people to succeed versus what they expect coming in and that friction between the two? What's the stuff that makes people succeed, those that do?
Yeah, when I think about this a lot, and I've even had to gather some data and metrics on it. And when you think about it, it's not the particular job they may have come from. It's not like their grades or other things. It's generally, have they been exposed to a little bit of coding and kind of have somewhat of an idea of, one, do I enjoy this? So they've now found some sort of emotional attachment to this thing. Because I do honestly think it's really difficult to give your all to something that you just don't like. And I've seen boot camps accept people that don't know any coding, say, well, don't worry, we'll take care of the whole thing for you. They find no emotional attachment. They can even get through and succeed technically and then find out, I hate this job.
Yeah.
And That's the
1000%.
worst thing, in my opinion, that can happen. The other one is, oddly enough, I see there's a few occupations that tend to do very, very well. And I wonder, and I think there's something within that. Musicians, people from
Yeah.
military background, teachers also need to do very, very well in this coding boot camp and also at other boot camps I've worked at. And I wonder why. I think part of it comes from creative problem solving. I think a lot of the discipline that is involved in some of those occupations. And I do know that that's a hard thing to test for or check for. But I look at the people that succeed,
It's
they're
their
disciplined a lot
detail
too.
orientedness. They
That-
are very, very detail oriented usually.
Yeah, I have a
That's a good one.
slightly different theory on that, which is I'm self-taught in music. It's
Oh, there you
exactly
go.
as Nate. It's exactly as what Nate described. Like, you know, the guitars that I've collected over the years. It's you spend a long. Okay, you come into it thinking I'm going to sound like Slash. Okay, for those of us from the 90s, or those of us these days, you know, I'm going to, you know, insert someone. You come in thinking
Sure.
this is who I'm going to be, which is the equivalent of I just saw The Social Network. I'm going to build the next Facebook in a weekend. That's the same sort of thinking, right? And then you start playing and you sound like shit for a very long time, and you struggle to find the note. Nowadays it's easy, and it's the same principle. You can look at a YouTube video, see what somebody else is doing, and copy along, and you still don't learn the principles properly because you're just copying along, right? Back when I was starting out, you had to do it by ear, or because I can't read sheet music, you know, and that persistence, that ability to go through failure after failure after failure until finally it sounds right, that practice mentality is for musicians. For military people, because I've seen that as well, it's because they're trained in discipline. Like for them, it's a question of identity. You have the grit to stick with it, right? So the military people tend to have the discipline, and they're very organized, very structured with time, very disciplined with everything, and all the discipline that's ancillary to coding also helps with the coding. And finally, for teachers, because they're used to seeing what learning looks like on the other side, they've absorbed those lessons about what learning looks like and what the process of learning looks like, so they're naturally better learners. So I've noticed exactly the same pattern, Ryan, that, you know,
This is interesting.
Yeah,
Ryan,
yeah,
you should just test them on how many failures they've had, and the
Right.
higher the failure rate, the better the developer.
1000%.
You're accepted. Yeah.
1000%. 1000. And you know, I have the same problem with folks who come for the personal coaching and mentorship that I do. Is about, and I measure this, about 56% have never tried to code before and want to earn six figures in the next 12 months, right? And this is the last 24-month thing. It's happened post-COVID. And I now say, look, I'm very happy. I'm pretty confident I can show you how to do it, but I don't want to yet, because you don't know you want to yet. You know you want the money. You don't know you want to do this 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is. So I'll typically go and give them like free code camp resources, some YouTube video, and say like that all the stuff is free out there. That bit you can learn. If you like it, come back to me. And honestly, I think maybe in the few hundred people that I've said that to in the last 2 years, maybe about 11 have come back to me. And that's a tiny percentage. We're talking less than 5% of people will come back after they've tried it. You know, and that makes me worry, because there are lots of people, like you said, Brian, who won't do that. Who'll say, yeah, you want it? Fine, I'll sell it to you.
Not a great business model, because I do that, and it hurts business a bit, to be honest. But it
1000%.
It does give us better results for the people that do, but it doesn't make a great, easily scalable business, honestly, as you know.
No, you can't do the mass market thing quite easily, and we'll have better results because obviously the kind of people we bring in are truly committed, but also there's plenty of people doing the mass market stuff, and I don't know if that's going to work anymore given the way, you know, technology is maturing. I actually did a podcast on this recently, of the maturity curve, the way technology is. Like, I think that world is gone, you know, where you do a 3-month boot camp and you just get snapped up. I think it was there for a while during the gold rush days, and you know, like every gold rush, now is the time when the industry matures, where there's genuine wealth to be made in technology. But like just after the gold rush, it went to those folks who didn't just pick up a pick and keep hacking at some dirt. You know, they actually sort of built up the infrastructure around their gold mining operations, which is what, you know, successful engineers will do going forward. So yeah, I mean, I guess this brings me to Nate and Anna, to your offer, which is about leveling up. So, okay, let's assume people go through all the friction and they go through all the stuff. They're now coders, you know, they've achieved the dream and they've overcome the obstacles. It doesn't end there, does it?
Not exactly. What about you share your most recent transition?
Yeah, so this was about 3 years ago, and I had you know, successfully learned how to code, and I had successfully made a career out of it. And that was really exciting, because I remember specific points in time when I kind of like looked at the road ahead and I was just like, I don't know if this is going to work, but was able to push through that friction. And, you know, now I'm making decent money, you know, working in the Midwest, and was married, bought a house, and, you know, we were expecting our our first kid, and I was working at a small design company. So it was like the sole software guy, did projects for a bunch of different clients, and it was super fun. Loved working with those people, and had some really, really interesting projects that I got to work on. But came to this realization that, like, part of the reason I got into this whole thing is because I thought there was going to be like multi six figures or something like that. Thought maybe there was like the chance of that happening. It's kind of part of that big promise, right? And I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm cool just kind of sitting with the status quo. And that was at, I think like year 6 or 7 in my coding career. I wish it was a lot earlier. I really do. But pretty quickly, I had to realize that what got me to that point, right, to my 5 to 6 year mark, was not going to get me into the big leagues. I had failed a couple phone screens that I thought I could just like roll into with my 5 years of experience and be like, look, I've been doing this thing for 5 years, just go ahead and give me the offer, but that's not how it works. When you get up into these bigger opportunities, you're interviewing alongside of hundreds of other candidates, and there's, a very strict process for, making sure that people are qualified and making sure that you're good to work with. And not only that, but I had some crippling anxiety around interviewing because of some bad experiences I had in the past. So I had to square up to that. I had to square up to, okay, I've got to learn this new skill set. I had never really looked at data structures and algorithms seriously. And I kind of like, had a little bit of a stinky attitude towards it, honestly, because it's like, they shouldn't be qualifying candidates based on this. They should just do like, just do like practical coding questions. Yeah. So I had to change my mindset towards that, because you're not going to learn something or become effective if you have like that resistance to it, right? So I decided, I remember specifically, it was February of the year that I ended up at Amazon. And I think it was I'm really remembering exact years, but I think it was 2021, I want to say. And I said, okay, I want to get into big tech. Like, I just made that decision. And I said to myself, it may take upwards of 5 years, but let's go, like, let's do it. So it's like, okay, what are the things I need to do? What are the steps I need to take? And I got real serious about it. And I became the type of person that prepared for these types of things, and kind of went through the mindset and sort of like the vision work of being in these long interview loops, right? And then 6 months later, I accepted an offer for coming from the Midwest for an amount of money that I never thought was possible, which was crazy to me, because I come from a culture of very, very deep culture of just stay put, just chill, stay in, suburban Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah,
Everything's
stay in your lane, be safe.
Right. But I just had this, I really wanted to see what was out there. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing intrinsically, but it was just me. It was my personality. And I decided, you know what? And that's the other thing too. My wife, who grew up in the military, she was very used to moving around. She had a real openness to, moving to a new area, potentially moving to a bigger urban area. And It was really me. It was all this resistance that I had deep down that was kind of keeping me from taking those steps. But yeah, once I did that, it was like, it happened, thankfully, a little bit faster than I thought it would, but it was still these mindset things that I had to work through, and these things that I had to learn. So
that really echoes a lot of what I did as well, in the sense that I did not focus on big tech for my first few roles, is what I thought it was going to be. And then I first focused on really understanding how interviews work. Now, I had an advantage because in my other 3 careers before that, in the 15, 17 years before that, I'd been on the interviewing side. And I understand how different it looks from the candidate's point of view. So I had that, and I've done that in 3, 4 countries. So I had that perspective that, okay, there's a certain meta pattern across industry, country, recruitment generally, right? There's a whole meta pattern around it. And so I didn't do the big tech thing at all. And then when I did, it was a completely different plan from my learning to code plan. But that's because I had the advantage of knowing how these recruitment processes work, what they're looking for and stuff like that. But the mindset work was huge, because the odds are against you, whether we like it or not, right? It is a statistical outlier to get into any company, forget big tech. Like any one interview, your odds are probably 90% against you. on a per interview basis, unless you're like distinguished with PhDs and a whole crazy ass track record, right? But for the average person, any one interview is a 90% failure rate. What I teach my students now is learning to code is honestly the easier part. Getting interviews is way harder, and then performing well in the interview. So like I take people through all 7 stages of from goal setting all the way to negotiation, and people tend to focus just on the learning to code part. Just like, people think, oh, being an author means I have to write the book, and everyone knows that. Well, those who've actually tried to write a book know that writing the book is the easy part. Getting an agent, getting an editor, getting published is ridiculously hard. Or all the folks who've launched a startup. Oh, I'm going to do a startup. They built the product, got 0 customers, no marketing, right?
No.
Like 3 times.
Thousands of hours.
Yeah. No, just guilty. Yeah, I think, same.
Right. So we all think, oh, learning to code is the hard part. No, that's not. It's actually marketing yourself, getting the opportunities, getting in front of people, getting the interviews, because ultimately you're a product that's being sold in the market. So getting your first paid customer is the same gig as launching a startup product. It's exactly the same principle. So those meta principles really help.
Yep.
And I got lucky, man. Like all the times before that, I tried for Google and as a lawyer, as a product person, never got it. Engineer, and this is what I keep telling people: don't make this your plan. If you think FANG is your plan, it's like saying I'm going to go fishing and I'm going to get the one tuna that's called Brian that lives near this coral. Like, it's ridiculous. You would never go fishing saying that, So it's the same sort of principle. Now I know Brian's got to jump in a bit because he's very busy and important, and I think
the paparazzi is here.
The paparazzi is here.
One of them, yeah.
He doesn't even know who anymore. It's just like one of the.
I just show up,
Yeah. They're in the summer house by the pool. The golden retrievers are keeping them company, so that's fine. He'll go and handle that in a moment. But Brian, before you jump off, man, and because I know you got to go. Given all this stuff about leveling up careers and how hard. Okay, so there's 2 parts of it: getting into the industry, and then as what Nate and Anna now do with their offer is helping people level up, right? And you and I do the get into the industry, and they do the level up. Where do you see AI changing the structure of all this and the pathways?
Oh wow, that's a loaded question. Jeez.
Yeah, you got 3 minutes before the paparazzi.
Yeah, holy moly. What does that mean? I mean, I use AI every day, like I'm sure we all do, especially in engineering, whether it's Copilot, ChatGPT, or whatever other tool people are using right now. I see this, my little crystal ball, is a moment where people are going to have to lean less into their technical ability and more into their higher level, like system design, architecture, and communication with other humans. Because the thing I hear the most from people that get on the phone with me and think about a boot camp, hasn't AI taken over the jobs yet? 1, no. 2, if you think that all coding is just writing code, then you're not aware of what the job actually entails. Like the amount of communication between all the different parties, the product management, like that Anna was doing, or the design team and the business and the executive team, the legal team. There's so many competing interests, and you need to coordinate all this and then write code to implement the actual business feature that the AI should help with the implementation. But the money is not in writing the code as much, I think, anymore. There's still, I think, a lot to do there. But
yeah,
the real money, I feel like, is in understanding how to orchestrate all these different people. And even as a junior, I think nowadays, the clean code you write is going to be less impressive than you being able to like write a really good peer review, for example, or coordinate with a team and quickly upskill. So I just see the shift from like technical ability is like, I'm the lone wolf coder person sitting in my hoodie in a room, is like, no, you're going to need to learn how to be really personable and communicate at a higher level than you may have had to even 3 years ago.
What do you think, Anna? What are your thoughts?
So because I'm not writing code or doing anything particularly complicated, for content for me is not that complicated, I don't rely on the bots, as I call them, the chat bots, to really support what I'm doing. The thing is, the AI and the chat bots, they can support you, and they're good for ideation. And if you're stuck or want to find information quickly, it's kind of like a more advanced Google, I guess. But at some point, everything will just be like chatbot like or voice enabled. So listen, like technology moves at a quick pace. It's going to keep improving. So no longer is coding going to be like this special skill, because at some point the bots will do the code for you. It's going to be real AI. Right now, in my opinion, it's not even artificial intelligence because nothing is intelligent. It's just reading trillions of data points and making its best estimation. And that's why we have all these weird, hallucinations and misplaced information and just like things that the bots pick up from Reddit that they think makes sense. It's crazy. Like I would never ask it any information that matters to me. What I would say as the takeaway is make sure you understand the business and whatever business you want to work at. That's it. Because your value will be helping to grow the business. Right now, no bot is going to grow any business.
Yeah.
It could be a support. It could be like help you learn something, but it's not going to deliver clients. It's not going to create all the content for you. Like you have to still be the brains. So unless it's actually intelligent, it's not going to really change that much. But you do want to learn the skills to help you do your job if it's part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Sorry, just to jump in there, Brian, do you need to head out? How much time do you have?
Heck.
Because we'll keep going for a bit, but if you need to drop out, you can just drop out. I'll edit all this bit out.
Hey, awesome seeing all you today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining,
Bye.
Brian. Bye.
Thank you. See ya.
So and so I know given your specific background, do you think, let's leave the code stuff out of it, do you think AI poses a more general opportunity or threat to junior level anything?
No, because junior levels anything less than 3 years of work experience, you're not getting hired for your work experience. Let's just agree on that.
Yeah.
And you want to think that you have some experience and some value that you're bringing because you could build an app or make a document. That's cool. You do a little bit. That's what you learn, right? You gather experience and you learn that stuff.
Yeah.
But they're not paying you like all that money because like you're really good at writing or something. Like that comes later with work experience. Maybe on one end of the spectrum, you're just a really, really fast learner and you go from like 0 to 100, like from junior to senior in like a year and a half, because you're just like really, really good. You have a lot of social skills, a lot of technical skills, fine. But like you have to learn to be yourself, and that has nothing to do with chatbots. So
yeah, no, 1000%.
Get it in the beginning of your career.
I've developed, so initially I totally was 1000% of the exact same view, and then I've developed a slightly more nuanced view and in the last few months, because late last year I started paying attention to what was happening in other industries, and it happened kind of accidentally. I was invited to some sort of online legal symposium thingy because of my background in law and now tech, and they wanted to understand AI, what it meant for them, and I'm like, interesting. So people are really starting to think about it, and it made me dig into like the legal AI space. And then I looked into the architecture AI space. And then now I've looked into marketing tech. And I have not found a single job that uses a computer that isn't in some way being impacted. And I'm using the word deliberately, impacted by AI, right? So I started digging deep. I said, okay, what does this mean? And so the very common objection is all about AI, the AI hallucinates. And I had one question for the legal guys. I said, because I understand their industry. I said, how many of you have had a junior legal person join the team and make mistakes? And 100%.
I mean, yeah, of course. And I didn't say that the industry isn't going to be affected. Of course, every single industry will be affected by the change in behaviors. Like there's this one startup I heard of that relied on Google search for people to find them. And then the product that they sold was like answers to like questions in universities. But with ChatGPT, you could just ask a chatbot those questions. And even if they're not 100% accurate, it still kind of like helps a little bit. And their audience was students. So that company has to completely shift everything. So of course, it'll affect the industry, every part of tech. But I'm saying like, you could certainly educate yourself on like what parts of the chatbots you want to work with. And how they can enhance your workflow. But if you don't know what the workflow is, like you got to start with the basics.
100%. And around the same time, I dislocated my shoulder and I was at the hospital having it shoved back in. And the radiographer who was sort of looking at all the X-rays, I asked her, I said, are you worried about the eye thing? She said, a little bit, because the AI can process and interpret X-ray data far faster and at greater volume than she can. And she spent 8 years developing that skill in a very early 30s. And she said, I watched this thing getting better in 3 months, what took me a few years to get better at. And she doesn't know. Sorry, go ahead.
Other industries outside of tech are going to be using these machine learning AI bots first.
Yeah.
Because it's much easier to analyze billions of medical data records and then make suggestions than figure out what like code needs to be written for some feature and how to optimize it and all that stuff.
So this is where I think potentially it could also impact tech. And the reason I say that is I think perhaps all of us here on this call have a slightly skewed perception of what, because of our limited experience, we've experienced really premium level roles. And we're quite privileged to have sort of had the experiences we have. When I see some of my students who come through who have engineering backgrounds, on paper, the kind of coding work they've done is the kind that could get replaced by AI, because it's a lot of very simple web manipulation, DOM manipulation, data entry. Some of them have engineer in their title and they're really kind of data entry.
And it will be 100%.
Right.
But you know what? We're asking the wrong questions. What we really want to know, and I don't yet know because I don't study this, is how will work evolve when aided by AI? And what higher level work will become available when we have chatbots to analyze our data within seconds? Personally, I wanted to analyze our data and give me an accurate response. I wanted to give me, percentage rates on conversions on sales, and take in spreadsheets and give me decks with all my charts in 2 seconds. Of course I want that.
Right. And I think that's where it'll end up being, is that the nature of the bundle of skills required and what is considered to be effective will change. Because a lot of people I see outside of tech as well will end up saying, hey, the more entry level work that I pay someone, because wages are the biggest cost on any balance, on any P&L, right? Wages are the single biggest cost. And where the wage can be replaced by something, depending on the kind of work, which is why I tell a lot of folks, it's not enough to just know how to code anymore. You actually need to level up and be a designer, an engineer, and a collaborator.
Being a developer is no longer a commodity. It used to be a little bit of a commodity. And in the beginning, it was kind of like a commodity because you could just hire a ton of developers and build something and I don't know, be lucky. Now, as the industry has progressed and matured, it's less and less a commodity and more like a higher knowledge work that's not just anyone can do because they know how to put a few lines of code.
Right. In fact, most of the coding work I've been doing for a few years now is reading code. I write far less code than I read.
And that's interesting. How many jobs do you think will be about, making code more efficient, getting code bases that are written already and then working off them?
Well, I think all of them.
That's already.
It's
already.
But I'm saying because there are probably apps right now that could do lightweight, they could develop lightweight applications, give you a whole code base. No one has to write it that technology.
Those have been around for a while.
Yeah, we've had code generators for a while, right? You just write one npm command and you have a scaffolded app. Sure, we've had that for a while.
Exactly. So that's already been around. It's not that new.
Well, I think it's really, you can't deny that it's going to impact the industry, and it already has. Copilot, GitHub Copilot is very good at what it does. It's not perfect, but which coder is anyway? It does. What's that?
I said, but which coder is anyway? The expectation of perfection from AI is unfair because we don't expect that of human beings, right?
Right.
I don't know. Eventually, I expect it to be perfect. That's the only reason. If I was a hiring manager, that's the only reason I would use AI versus buying.
So you wouldn't do it because it could save you $100,000 a year and give you the same level of imperfection?
I think that you would. I think that you would probably replace it if it was at a certain threshold. But what I'll say is this: even if it's not perfect right now, it's early and it's not going to be that long until those problems are fixed.
Let me tell you this: when we got Excel sheets started being available.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, the people that had to sit there and like put data in a thing and then create tables and all that stuff, like their jobs are no longer available, right? So that's, in a way, that's like a natural.
You're 1000% right, but I feel that analogy breaks down when the thing
Mm.
that is doing the work is also learning and improving
I
on
hope
its own.
so. Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
like
That's
I
true.
mean, folks have said that, oh, when the car was invented, all the carriage drivers went out of business. It's true, but it is easier to learn to drive a car. You can learn to drive a car in 48
Right.
hours. You can't
Yep.
learn to code in 48 hours or code faster than the
Mhm.
AI can. And this is the thing I was telling the legal folks, is that the average junior takes in law takes about a year before you're confident in what they do, because you have to
Mhm.
there's constantly iteration cycles, right? And that trust needs to be developed. The AI will fix it for you then and there. Like, you can literally say, that's not wrong,
Right.
that's not right, try it again, and it'll learn and it'll get better, right? And it's learning velocity and it's training velocity so much more, which sort of,
Mhm.
but I think, Anna, your point is still valid in that ultimately building products is a human exercise, because we're building it for humans, right?
Mhm.
And there's a judgment layer that needs to come into it, there's a human intuition layer that
Mhm.
needs to come into it, and ultimately all the AI is going to do is, the way I use it, Nate, I'm not sure if you use it in the same way, is it saves me a shit ton of keystrokes and research. But the
Mhm.
actual polishing, like, it gives me the lump of clay, and I don't have to get my hands dirty with clay and water and getting the trough ready. It just gives me this
Right.
half formed lump of clay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I've saved an hour of shaping or 2 hours of shaping. That's
I
all
feel
it's
like
done.
at this point, AI is these like high level CMSs that exist. Like we went from WordPress to Squarespace, and
Right.
maybe there's like other things right now that just kind of like creates a website based on some prompts you put it in. And I expect the tech industry to go that route. And
Yeah.
another thing I wanted to mention is like companies rarely go and hire junior people in the first place. That's just a fact. We all know this. How did I find a job? I didn't. I freelanced for 2 years, working almost by myself because I had no clue how to even position myself. And also, I
Yeah.
didn't really have the work experience.
Yeah.
But notice, if I don't have the work experience, I don't know how to position myself. And like, I
Yeah.
don't know what
It's a
to look
catch
for.
22 situation, 100%. Well,
So, anyways, to get into tech was never like a one and done, like, I'm just going to snap my fingers. And people have very rarely been commodities in tech, and we need to understand that your uniqueness, you have to learn how to sell that. That's what gives you salaries, that's what gives you opportunities.
right.
So it's interesting that nowadays selling yourself has been even more important because we're remote first. So anyways, as AI increases and gets better, good
Yeah.
for the space.
And Nate, what are you seeing among the younger developers? Because you've been around doing it a while. In terms of these, a very specific question here for you, Nate. When a younger developer swaps out asking a senior developer in place of asking ChatGPT, for example,
Mhm.
and then using that code, you know, is it just exactly the same thing as we did with Stack Overflow, or is it a little bit more subtle in terms of the downsides of doing that?
I can tell you what it's been recently. I don't know if it necessarily is going to be a reflection of how it will be 5 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Right now, and probably for the next year or so, if you're trying to learn how to code for whatever reason, I would I would really caution you against using general chatbots. I think it not only does it give you wrong information sometimes, like straight up just gives you, which that problem will be fixed eventually, right? But not only that, but you're doing this thing in your brain, which is what we also used to do with Stack Overflow,
Exactly.
before chatbots, is you would see this error pop up in your console, like whatever. And instead of reading the error, you would
Yes.
immediately go to Google, right?
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're actually building up a resistance in your mindset to actually doing the work of trying to understand the thing. Now, what you'll do eventually is you'll do the Stack Overflow thing enough to get through that problem. And then over time, your understanding will level up, right? And
Yeah.
you'll get better over time. What I see ChatGPT doing right now is it's that on steroids. So you're actually building an even stronger resistance to doing the work in a much earlier stage. So if you're trying to learn how to code, and listen, if I can like speak to people who are saying, oh, I don't want to get into code, or I'm trying to get into code, but I'm afraid AI is going to take it over. In the next 5 years, like the good thing is that's just another one of these pieces of friction, right? It's literally just another excuse for people to not take action. Oh, AI is going to take over. I'm not going to learn how to code, right? Great. That means if you stick with it, you know, you've already done hard things. You've already pushed through a lot of friction. You're already like 95%, you know, further ahead than other people who are kind of just dropping off when, you know, the TikTok reels don't end up being quite as true as you thought they would be, right? Or, oh no, AI is going to take over, let that cause people to fall off the path. And, you know, if you love doing this and you are energized by building things and creating things, I would say like ultimately, once you get to the point where you can understand these systems, you're an orchestrator anyway. Guess what? Yeah. When you try to get to senior, you're demonstrating how you're delivering through other people anyway, right? You're showing like what code reviews you can do. You're showing like how you can put systems together. If ChatGPT or like AI helps in that process or aids in that process, amazing. But I don't think that, I think like, and I'm a little bit of an AI curmudgeon too. I haven't found a good use for it in my workflow that like makes sense for me. But I'll say that's after 10 years of individual contributor work where I'm just like real muscle memory with stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I have people on my team even that use it sometimes, but I don't think it's like, it's not a problem solving mechanism.
No.
You still have to be able to like explain to your management like how something works. Or you know what I mean? You have to, you're on the hook.
Yeah, and you've got to understand the system and you know, looping back, because I'm mindful of you guys' time as well. It's your evening. You know, looping back to the start of this conversation where we talked about how people chronically underestimate what coding is. They have the wrong expectations. They have the wrong assumptions about it, right? I have a feeling the AI thing makes it worse, because what I'm seeing is a lot of people without any coding insight or knowledge using ChatGPT to build something and being convinced of their original wrong assumption that it's actually an easier skill to achieve than it is, because, hey, I was able to build a primitive app. And that reinforces the misunderstanding that that's what software engineering is writing a bit of, you know, nobody that I've never walked into a job and written on a clean file that had no code in it before. Like 99% of what I do
is a lot rarer than you'd think.
Right.
No, who works with like no code? Like everyone works from some code base, unless you're
lucky and you'll get to work on a greenfield project. It sometimes happens. I actually did it a lot when I was freelancing for like smaller projects. But when you get into these bigger teams, it's like 99%.
Yeah.
You know,
my first job was all greenfield code because it was a new startup. There were 4 of us. It was brand new. So it had to be greenfield because it was starting up. But once you get to 6 months of work onwards, if there have been at least 2 engineers, we're talking about thousands of lines of code. You know, you're not, it's by that point of time, you're working with stuff that's been there longer than you have.
So much longer than you have. People really need to understand how to read a code base and communicate within the code base. That's the main skill.
100%.
And debug it, because I did this LinkedIn survey about 9 months ago, and I said, anybody with more than 1 year of experience, please, in software engineering, please answer, how much time do you spend reading code? Oh, so do you spend most of your time reading code, or do you spend most of your time writing code? And 80% said reading code. Right. And it makes sense, because what we're learning on tutorials is, okay, create a new index.js file and start. That's what the tutorial is going to tell you. People will do it and they think that's what coding is. But when you walk into a code base, you're like, oh my God, this tree is ginormous. I don't even know where to start. There's hundreds of thousands of lines of code. Where's the index.js file and why does that happen? Like, that's really what it is. And then you've got to piece it together. Now, that's really hard to do in a YouTube tutorial, because it's not a lot of typing. There's no feedback. It's a lot of reading. And
are there tutorials of like engineers just reading code bases?
Not a lot, because it's dull as watching paint dry. It is the
most work.
Right. That's the work though. But you can't.
I wonder who can make it interesting. Nate, you should try it.
Yeah, Nate, go for it.
You know, commentary.
I license it off you because I'm too lazy to do it myself. Could make it something
it'll be like a reaction video, you know? You basically react to the code. Be like,
the closest I do think it's a really critical skill that you can actually develop relatively early. Eric Anderson actually had a really good list about this. There
Who
was,
did, sorry?
I don't know if you're from Eric Anderson. I got to go dig it up. It was a while ago. He's like, whenever I find a code base, like he's like, this is a really important skill. Whenever I find a new code base, I immediately do these things. Where are my routes set up?
Yeah.
Where are my log files? How do I dump and die so I can see like what's in a variable? How can I actually see what's going on at runtime? And depending on your environment, that's going to look different, right? How do I deploy? What do my deployment schedules look like? Are there tests? You know, and basically code-based navigation. That is a huge critical skill that you have to develop. And I think that's not something you can just feed
code-based
into
navigation.
ChatGPT.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing when you try to teach code-based navigation, because I've done it, and I've had people teaching me that. Like at Google, we didn't use VS Code and stuff because the code base is too big, right? So they have their own cloud-based ID. Everything's being built in the cloud. Nothing's on your local machine. So you have to learn all these new tools, and navigating with those tools which are unfamiliar is really hard, And so when somebody else teaches you, it's actually like I've seen a few Twitch videos where people try and do this. They're trying to build something, and they will always 2x their own recording as they're stumbling around, fumbling around, and mumbling around, like, because it's boring as that shit to watch this. But I'm not saying coding is boring. When you're the person doing it, you can get lost for hours, right? Because it's truly addictive. But it's not a spectator sport. It really isn't. And so that's why there's not a lot of content on good debugging, or because a lot of the times you're not going to debug an app that you wrote from scratch, because as you went along, it was so primitive that it sort of, it's fairly bug free for the demonstration purposes. But production apps, the bug could be hidden so deep inside, and just getting that trace could take you, 2 weeks of work of digging around.
So,
like that's the reality of it.
If, these chatbots today could ingest a code base and tell you all the things that you need to know to understand like the main principles of it, that would be really useful. I don't know if they're doing that right now. I've never heard it, but
they do a smaller version of that. And I'm sure Nate's right that they can do it eventually, but they do a smaller version of that. Like you can paste a ginormous file and say, tell me what this file is doing, so I don't have to read it. Like you can do, and it'll do a decent enough job of it.
I saw there's a VS Code extension. I think it was like advertised on one of Fireship's videos. I don't know if you're familiar with Fireship. Big fan of that guy. But basically, you install it in VS Code, and it's like a chatbot, but it will also take into account your file directory and like the tabs you have open too, which I thought was really cool. So that context is like a really massive.
I mean, there's no doubt that it'll compress time for a lot of tasks, but it's not necessarily, but ultimately, like the other thing is accountability, because you cannot sue a chatbot.
It's not accountable at all, right?
You cannot fire a chatbot. Someone's got to be accountable for the chatbot. And that has to be a human person. So, there has to be a human layer for it as well. So I don't see it as replacing, but I do see it as potentially impacting, since junior level roles, to your point, Anna, which I agree with, junior level roles are always more challenging. And that is often the layer that could get targeted by these things. I now feel more than ever that getting any role, and I'm seeing this not just in tech, I'm seeing this in at least 6 other industries that I'm looking at the moment. The nature of what a junior needs to do to stand out is different, and it's actually less
higher because the industry
in some senses. And it's also less technical. It's less about the topic that you've been trained in, because that's changing so fast, and more about your ability to grasp the bigger picture and work with it. So guys, we've had a long conversation, so thank you so much. I'm sure I'm keeping some of you at least from dinner, so I apologize for doing that, but it's been a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been great.
You're welcome.
And thanks for sharing all your perspectives. And this is why I brought the group together, because we all have such diverse perspectives, and I really want people out there to understand there is no one road. There are certain principles that are common to all the journeys, but there is no one road, and you have to choose the one. So for those of you guys who are still watching and listening, check out Anna and Nate, and they're going to tell you in a moment where you can find them, and check out their new program, for folks in tech that are looking to level up their engineering careers. And I'll drop in the show notes stuff for Brian, for Varsity, his bootcamp, and stuff for my sort of coaching program, because the reason I bring people together like this, even though we're, some people say, aren't you sort of competing? No, I don't believe so, because we're all here to do the same thing, and there are different flavors for different people, right? And everyone has the right to choose what's right for them and self-actualize that way. So that's why I bring the group together. So Anna and Nate, where can people find you, and where would you like people to go to next to understand more about your offer?
So our offer is called, it's a mentorship program, 6-month mentorship program called Code Career Mastery. I handle the networking and branding, help software engineers talk about themselves so they can stand out in interviews and beyond. And Nate handles all the technical interviews, so you don't get so nervous when you have to whiteboard. You can find us on LinkedIn and, of course, codecareermastery.com.
Perfect. Nate, do you have anything else to add to that?
Couldn't have said it better myself. And yeah, we hope to see you soon.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I'll leave some links to the Future Coders Match Fit Mastery program as well in the show links. And my job is really to help people who are not sure about whether they want to code, figure that out. And also those who sure they want to code, change career while they maintain their family and their existing jobs. It's a little bit longer, but I believe it can be safer for some people to do it that way because you're less likely to quit when you have the right plan and you're not financially anxious all the time. And so that's how I do it. So yeah, thanks for joining, guys. And Nate, it was lovely to have you here. And it was great to have Brian as well. I'll send him a message separately, but I'm sure I'll see you guys on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Zubin.
Thanks, guys.
Just subscribe. You know you got to do it.